Good morning and welcome to this last live session at EULAR 2026. My name is Alvaro Gomez. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm.
And also welcome from me. My name is Michael Pölzl. I'm a patient representative from Austria with EULAR PARE. We are delighted to be joined today by Professor John Isaacs. Professor Isaacs is a professor of clinical rheumatology from the Newcastle University. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
So for patients, of course, thinking about precision treatments such as CAR T-cell, which you've just been talking about in your talk, holds a lot of promise. But could you maybe just give us a bit of an outline where we are today, what is possible already, and who benefits the most at the moment?
CAR T cells look like a very interesting and exciting therapy. We are at the very earliest stages, so relatively small numbers of patients have been treated. But there again, the first patients are now more than 5 years from their treatment, and some of those patients look like they've been cured. They're on no therapy for 5 years and their disease has gone away. There's no signs in the blood of their disease. So that's really exciting. I think the important thing to consider is for every therapy that's so revolutionary, we go through phases. So we hear about all the success stories. There will inevitably be some patients who don't do so well, that maybe we don't hear about until later on. And of course, these therapies come with side effects as well. So we have to understand those, and we don't really get to understand those well until a lot of patients have been treated. And we know with CAR T, for example, that there will be infectious morbidity, serious infections. So right now, I think it's an exciting treatment for patients with severe diseases like lupus and scleroderma and myositis, who have not responded to more conventional treatments. If the data support the long-term efficacy in many of the recipients with good safety, then I could imagine this therapy would be brought forward, if you like, and used to treat perhaps less aggressive disease, less refractory disease. And the other thing that will happen, there will be a lot of spin-offs, if you like, slightly modified therapies which perhaps don't require such aggressive conditioning up front, perhaps don't even require hospital admission. So I think the other exciting thing about these sorts of therapies is they lead to other ideas. So we're at the beginning, but I think there's a lot of promise.
And if you look ahead now in the future in terms of implementation, so CAR T therapies do require complex infrastructure and have really high costs. So how can we prepare ourselves so that in the future we can offer these alternatives in a global context for people who don't live in high-income countries?
Great question. And of course, we've been through this story before with biologic therapies. And inevitably and sadly, there will be some inequity initially. And there's two parts to this. There's the cost, and the cost will come down. As the therapies are seen to be successful, there will be incentives for a number of companies to come into the market. There'll be competition. They'll all want to reduce their prices, but they're not going to be as cheap as an oral drug, so there's always going to be expense. And the other side of the coin is patients have to have access. So some of that will be geography. So, organizations such as EULAR are excellent at providing guidance and providing education. And some of that is guidance to the countries' health systems, for example. And some of it is, and a really important part is educating the patients themselves so they know what's out there. Even in a country like mine, there's a lot of health inequity because not everybody lives close to a hospital. And if they do live close to a hospital, it may not be a teaching hospital with the facilities for CAR T therapy. There's only a few centres in the UK, so we have to ensure that the system is sufficiently nimble. There is a referral pathway so that patients get referred along that pathway. But again, part of that is that the patients need to understand what's there. And I think a really important part of medicine in general is right from the very first consultation, there has to be a good dialogue with patients so that they really understand their disease, what the possibilities are. And that conversation needs to be tailored for the particular patient because some people want lots of information, some don't want very much. But the important thing is to ensure they have hope and recognize that there are options for them.
Yes, and if you alluded to this already in the answer to the first question, obviously patients will be looking for long-term remission. Do we know about longevity? Do we have data? What kind of systems I put in place to actually monitor that now, and also the safety of it in long term? Is there anything ongoing at the moment?
I think for all these CAR T cells are genetically modified therapies, so patients regulations insist that they are followed up for 15 years from a safety perspective. And, of course, we will want to be watching these patients over that period anyway. As like I said, the first patients are now more than 5 years, but many patients are just a few months. And so we don't really know whether that 5 years, we're starting to call it disease-free survival, whether that's going to be the norm or whether perhaps it doesn't last so long. But even if it doesn't last so long, then it may be that patients start to respond more readily to the simpler drugs. So, and we've seen that before as well with other types of therapy like stem cell transplantation.
Okay, so we've been focusing mostly on CAR T-based therapies, and we know that they are offered to a specific subset of patients who are those with severe refractory disease who have failed several lines of treatments. So are there other emerging therapies that can be offered perhaps to a broader group of patients?
Once we recognize a mechanism of action, then other therapies emerge. And the very well-known one now is what we call the bispecific T-cell engagers, which is another way of depleting cells, which, that there's still going to be side effects. So we can't say they are really safe. We have to still generate data both for efficacy and safety. They will definitely be less expensive. And they probably will be a little bit safer, but with all of these therapies, it now looks like the depth of depletion may well be what determines the efficacy. So if you have a therapy which depletes a little bit less, it's probably going to be safer, but will it be as effective? And we have to generate that data. I mean, the other exciting therapy, I think, which you've heard a little bit about at this meeting, is what we call in vivo CAR T therapy, where rather than taking the patient's cells, you inject the vector directly into the blood, and that, if you like, transduces the T cells in vivo. If that were to work, again, it would be cheaper, probably a little bit safer, I think. I shouldn't really say that because we don't know, but I think what I'm saying, it's probably going to transduce less cells than the ex vivo approach. So again, there'll be a question, is it as effective? It's certainly going to be simpler, probably an outpatient, probably safer, at least in the short term. So I think, there'll be a lot of other options, and it may well be that CAR T is reserved for the really refractory, very, very sick patients who are hospitalized perhaps, a bit like stem cell transplantation has been used. And then there will be these other therapies, perhaps, if they make it through to the market, the bispecific T-cell engagers, trispecific T-cell engagers, in vivo CARs. There'll be a lot of related therapies, if you like, but we still have to generate the data to decide whether they're going to be as effective and the safety.
Well, thank you very much indeed. This is really exciting times, many new therapies into the landscape now. So we're looking forward to the updates in perhaps year 2027. So thank you.
Me too.
Professor,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I thank everybody for joining us.